The boy did not cry when the needle pierced his skin. He was 9 years old, thin as a reed, his hair the pale gold of his Frankish ancestors, his eyes fixed on the dust motes turning in the sunlit air of Jerusalem. William of Tyre watched closely. He pressed the point again, harder this time, into the child's arm. No flinch, no pain. A silence fell in the chamber, heavy as incense. William withdrew his hand slowly. In that moment, before any word was spoken, the fate of a kingdom shifted. Baldwin did not yet know the word leprosy. He only knew that the men around him looked away, that his mother's breath caught, that the tutor who had taught him letters and scripture now crossed himself as if before a grave. That night, in the year of our Lord 1170, Baldwin lay awake and pressed his fingers together, testing sensation. The world felt unchanged. Jerusalem still breathed beneath his window, the murmured prayers, the clatter of hooves, the distant chant from the Temple Mount. And yet something invisible had entered his body, a quiet enemy that would never leave. He was the son of King Amalric I. He was not meant to be fragile. When Amalric died in July of 1174, the bells of Jerusalem rang not with joy, but with dread. The crown passed not to a seasoned warrior, but to a boy of 13, whose hands already betrayed him. On the 15th day of July, beneath the vaulted stone of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, Baldwin knelt. The crown was heavier than he expected. When it was placed upon his head, his neck trembled. Not from fear, he told himself, but from the weight of history. "I am King of Jerusalem," he whispered inwardly. And beneath the gold, beneath the silk, his flesh was already failing. They crowned him anyway. The court spoke softly around him in those early days, as if volume alone might break him. Regents circled like cautious birds. Raymond of Tripoli smiled with practiced patience. Agnes of Courtenay, his mother, watched everyone and trusted no one. Baldwin listened. At night, alone, he stared at his hands. Sometimes he could not feel the rosary beads slipping through his fingers. Sometimes he could. The uncertainty was worse than pain. "I will not be a ghost king," he swore to the darkness. By 1175, the name of Saladin traveled through Jerusalem like a cold wind. Sultan of Egypt and Syria, unifier of Islam, a man who prayed before he fought and fought as if chosen by God. Reports arrived, villages raided, caravans seized, borders tested. Baldwin read them all, lips pressed thin. "They think me weak," he said once quietly to Brother Matthew, a monk who had been assigned to attend him and who never looked away from the scars. "They smell sickness." Brother Matthew bowed his head. "Even Christ was despised in the flesh, my lord." Baldwin smiled faintly. Christ rose again. The court urged caution, delay, diplomacy. Baldwin agreed in words, but in his chest burned a restlessness that frightened even him. Each morning, he woke unsure of what part of himself would fail next. Time was not an ally. In 1176, his right hand began to curl inward. A physician burned away dead flesh while Baldwin stared at the wall and recited psalms through clenched teeth. He did not scream. He refused that mercy. "Write," he told his scribe that evening, hand shaking, "write that Jerusalem stands." When Saladin moved again in late 1177, it was with purpose. His army poured north from Egypt, confident, numerous, relentless. Scouts brought word, the Frankish forces were scattered. Baldwin was ill, victory seemed assured. Jerusalem trembled. Baldwin was 16, he ordered his armor brought. "You cannot ride," Raymond protested. "Your body—" "My body is not the kingdom," Baldwin replied, "but I am its king." They marched from Ascalon with barely a fraction of the force Saladin commanded. Dust choked the air. Baldwin rode wrapped in white, the cross of Jerusalem bright against his chest. Beneath the armor, his skin burned and numbed in equal measure. On the road to Montgisard, he prayed, not for victory, but for clarity. If he was to fall, let it be standing. On the morning of November 25th, 1177, the enemy camp lay before them, sprawling and unguarded in confidence. Saladin did not expect attack, not from a boy, not from a dying king. Baldwin raised his standard. His arm trembled violently, but he held it high. "Now," he said, The horns sounded, horses surged forward, steel met flesh, dust swallowed the sun. Baldwin spurred his horse into the chaos, the cross blazing through the smoke, riding straight toward the heart of an army that believed him already dead. And as Saladin turned, finally understanding what charged toward him, the world broke open. Saladin's banner snapped like a black wing above the dust, and for an instant, Baldwin saw only motion: men, horses, spears. Then the glint of a golden helm as the Sultan's guard surged to close the gap. They were too late. The Frankish charge hit like a thrown stone against glass, impossible, sudden, and shattering. The enemy camp, still half asleep in its own certainty, collapsed into panic. Lines that should have formed dissolved into shouting knots. A war that had been planned as a slow tightening of a noose became, in the span of heartbeats, a struggle to breathe. Baldwin did not feel the reins. His right hand, wrapped in linen, stiff beneath the gauntlet, barely responded when he pulled. The horse corrected anyway, guided by the press of his knees. He learned early to govern by other means. When the body betrayed, the will must become louder. He rode past a fallen tent pole, past a toppled brazier spilling ash, past men who turned their faces away in fear and disbelief. Not fear of his sword, no one feared a boy's blade. Fear of what he represented, a king who should not be alive. He caught sight of Baldwin of Iberlan at the edge of the melee, his face streaked with dust, shouting orders as if his lungs could impose order upon chaos. Beside him rode a young man Baldwin had never met before, slender, swift, moving with the instinct of someone who had known hunger longer than comfort. Their eyes met only briefly, the stranger's gaze sharp with the startled reverence of a man who realizes he is watching a legend being born. A legend Baldwin did not want. He wanted results. "Hold them," Baldwin called, his voice hoarse. "Hold them, do not scatter." But men scattered anyway, victory intoxicated faster than wine. Knights chased fleeing enemies in hungry arcs. Footmen broke formation to plunder abandoned wagons. In the midst of the storm, discipline cracked. Baldwin's heart tightened. This is where we die, he thought, not from the enemy's strength, from our own impatience. A horse slammed past him, riderless, eyes white. Baldwin's mount shied, and for a moment the world tilted. The king's weak hand slipped, the reins slid. He felt nothing in his fingers, only the sudden cold in his stomach, the awareness that his body could undo a kingdom in a second. Someone grabbed the bridle from the side, a voice close and urgent. "My lord." The stranger, the slender young man, had ridden up. His gloved hand clenched the leather and steadied Baldwin's horse with a strength that bordered on insolence. Baldwin stared at him, furious, then saw the calm beneath the urgency. The young man bowed his head without looking away. "Forgive me. I could not watch you fall." Baldwin's jaw tightened. He wanted to shout, "I do not fall." But the truth hovered between them, unspoken and undeniable. He nodded once. "Your name?" "Yusuf," the young man said, then corrected himself as if remembering where he stood. "No, I am called Joseph here. I was a groom at Ascalon. They let me ride with the baggage train. When the horns sounded, I followed. A groom, a nobody, a man with no right to touch a king's reins." Baldwin should have punished him. Instead, Baldwin felt something almost like gratitude, sharp and unfamiliar. He swallowed it like medicine. "Stay," he ordered, "close." Joseph's eyes flickered with surprise, then steadied. "Yes, my lord." The tide of battle shifted again when Saladin's guard finally stabilized, forming a protective wall around their leader. Baldwin glimpsed the Sultan, composed even in disorder, his gaze sweeping the field with the cold focus of a man counting lives like coins. Saladin's eyes landed on Baldwin. Recognition passed across that distance, not of a face, but of a symbol. Baldwin raised the cross standard higher. His arm shook violently. He willed it not to drop. For a moment, the two leaders watched each other through dust and noise. One a seasoned conqueror with thousands at his command, the other a boy king with a dying body and a small army that should have been erased. Saladin's mouth tightened, something between disdain and reluctant respect. Then the Sultan turned. Not in cowardice, Baldwin would later admit, in calculation. Saladin withdrew to preserve what he could. The day was lost, the war was not. As Saladin's forces began to retreat in ragged waves, the Franks surged forward with triumphant cries. Baldwin wanted to chase, to finish it, to burn the memory of fear from the kingdom's bones. But Brother Matthew's voice echoed in his mind. Even victory can be temptation. Baldwin's horse slowed, his breath came in sharp pulls. Beneath his armor, his skin was damp and hot. The numbness in his hand spread up his wrist like ink in water. He looked around the battlefield, not for glory, but for the kingdom's future. Men shouted, men fell, men knelt and prayed. Somewhere a standard toppled into the dust and was lifted again. Baldwin whispered to himself, "Remember this, Jerusalem. Remember you can bleed and still stand." He did not see the moment his mother arrived. Agnes of Courtenay rode hard from the rear, her veil snapping like a banner. She dismounted before anyone could offer assistance and walked straight to her son, her eyes bright with an emotion she rarely allowed herself in public. "You did it," she said, voice trembling in spite of her. "My son, you did it." Baldwin tried to smile, but his lips would not obey. The adrenaline was leaving him, and behind it came exhaustion like a closing door. He swayed. Agnes reached for him and then froze as she saw his hand, the gauntlet stained through at the seams, the fingers curled in a way armor could not hide. Her triumph flickered. Baldwin saw it. He leaned down, close enough that only she could hear. "Do not look at me like that." Agnes's throat moved. "How should I look at you?" "As if I am still your king," Baldwin whispered. Agnes held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded, the court mask returning like a drawn curtain. She turned to the gathered nobles and lifted her voice. "Behold Baldwin, king of Jerusalem, victor at Montgisard." Cheers rose, rolling across the field like thunder. Baldwin closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he saw not cheers but shadows. Future shadows, long and hungry, wearing the faces of men who smiled too easily. They returned to Jerusalem as heroes. The city greeted them with bells and incense and a fevered joy that seeped into every stone. Priests proclaimed miracles. Merchants swore they had seen angels in the dust above the battlefield. Mothers pressed their children forward to touch the hem of Baldwin's cloak as if he carried holiness in the threads. Baldwin endured it, smiling when required, nodding, speaking brief words of thanks. He could not tell them what victory had cost, not blood alone, but the sharpening of his own awareness that the clock inside him was winding down. At night, when the palace finally quieted, Brother Matthew helped him remove his armor. The metal left red marks on his skin. Baldwin stared at his hands. His right hand would not fully open. He flexed it again and again until sweat beaded at his temples. Brother Matthew said softly, "Your Grace." "Not yet," Baldwin murmured. "What?" "Not yet," Baldwin repeated, voice raw. "Not yet. I will not be carried like an invalid. I will not be a child on a throne." Brother Matthew's expression did not change, but sadness darkened his eyes. "Even kings are carried, my lord, sometimes by men, sometimes by time." Baldwin looked away. In the months after Montgisard, politics moved like water finding cracks. Raymond of Tripoli came often, his manner warm, his counsel measured. "Your victory has bought the kingdom breathing space," he said. "Use it wisely." "I intend to," Baldwin replied. Raymond's gaze flicked to Baldwin's hand. Quick, controlled. But Baldwin saw it. Everyone saw it now. There were whispers in corridors, in chapels, in marketplaces. How long? Who next? What if the king cannot ride? What if he cannot produce an heir? Baldwin did not pretend he did not hear. He used the whispers like a map. He also used people. Joseph, the groom turned squire by the accident of courage, was officially reassigned to the king's service, to the astonishment of men who believed bloodlines were the only language worth speaking. Some resented it, some mocked it. Baldwin did not care. Joseph learned quickly how to strap armor without looking at scars, how to adjust stirrups without pity, how to keep his face blank when courtiers smiled with knives. One evening, as Baldwin struggled to sign a decree, ink blotting beneath his stiff fingers, Joseph moved closer. "May I hold the parchment?" he asked. Baldwin's pride flared. "I am not helpless." Joseph's voice remained steady. "No, my lord, but I have hands that feel." The words struck Baldwin harder than any insult. He stared at Joseph, at his calm eyes, his unadorned honesty, and a sudden wave of loneliness rolled up from Baldwin's chest like bitter water. "You are bold," Baldwin said. Joseph bowed. "Only because your life depends on boldness." That night Baldwin could not sleep. He thought of Saladin's eyes. He thought of the crowd's prayers. He thought of his mother's brief flicker of fear. And then he thought of succession. The kingdom's fragility lay not only in its borders, but in its blood. His sister Sibylla was young, beautiful, and dangerously valuable. Men spoke her name with ambition. A marriage could anchor alliances or rot them from within. Baldwin summoned the council. The chamber smelled of wax and parchment. Raymond sat with composed patience. Agnes stood behind Baldwin's chair like a shadow that could speak. Balian of Ibelin watched with guarded caution. Knights and barons filled the benches, their rings flashing when they shifted. Baldwin sat upright, forcing dignity into a body that wanted to sag. "My lords," he began, voice clear, "you have all seen what we face. Saladin will return. The victory at Montgisard has not ended the war. It has merely taught our enemy respect." Murmurs. Baldwin continued, "We must strengthen the realm. We must ensure unity. And we must ensure the line of succession is not a blade pointed at our own throat." The murmurs sharpened. They all knew what he meant. "Therefore," Baldwin said, "my sister Sibylla will marry with the kingdom in mind." Raymond lifted a hand gently. "Your Grace, we agree in principle. But the choice of husband," Baldwin's gaze narrowed, "will not be a prize claimed by factions." Agnes stepped forward then, voice smooth as silk. "We have received proposals," she said. "Noble men, powerful men." Baldwin looked at his mother. He could almost hear the unspoken, "men who will answer to us." Raymond's expression tightened slightly. Powerful men often seek power first. Baldwin's hand clenched, stiff fingers trembling. He forced them still. "Exactly," he said, "so we will choose a man who understands duty." A pause. Eyes met. Calculations spun. Then a messenger arrived at the door, breathless, dusty, out of place among polished stone. He bowed low. "Your Grace, news from the south." Baldwin's pulse quickened. "Speak." "Saladin is gathering forces again," the messenger said. "Not marching yet, but gathering. And there are letters moving between certain lords and his agents, quietly." The chamber went cold. Baldwin did not move, but inside him something snapped into sharp focus. Traitors, or men afraid enough to flirt with betrayal. He turned his gaze slowly across the faces in the room. Some held steady, some blinked too quickly, some smiled faintly as if unconcerned. Baldwin felt his illness like a second skin, a constant reminder. Time was his enemy, but so were these men. He spoke softly, and the softness frightened them more than shouting would have. "Which lords?" The messenger swallowed. "Names are not confirmed, my lord, but the letters, they bear seals that resemble those of—" A cough interrupted him. Not Baldwin's. Raymond's. Raymond's eyes were fixed on the messenger with a warning that did not look like a warning, only like polite attention. Baldwin's mind raced. If Raymond had reason to stop the messenger, then either Raymond was protecting someone, or Raymond was protecting the kingdom from panic, or Raymond was hiding his own game. Agnes's hand touched Baldwin's shoulder, lightly, possessively. "We must be careful," she murmured. "False accusations can tear us apart." Baldwin wanted to believe her, but he had learned something since the needle in his childhood arm. The greatest dangers are the ones that arrive quietly, wrapped in concern. He dismissed the council with measured words, but his thoughts burned. Later that night, he stood in the palace chapel alone. Candlelight trembled over stone saints. The air smelled of cold wax and old prayers. Baldwin knelt with difficulty, joints stiff, and pressed his forehead to his clasped hands. "God," he whispered in English, then in Latin, then in the rough French of his mother. "If you have chosen to take my body, then lend me your sight. Let me see who will break this kingdom when I am gone." Behind him, a soft footstep. He did not turn. "Joseph," he said. "Yes, my lord." "Do you think a king can be loved?" A pause. "A king can be admired." "That is not the same." "No," Joseph admitted. Baldwin swallowed. His throat felt tight, as if he were speaking around a stone. "When I was crowned on July 15th, 1174, they looked at me like a candle already halfway burned. When I won at Montgisard, they looked at me like a miracle they could spend." Joseph said nothing. In that silence, Baldwin felt absurdly safer. Baldwin continued, voice lower. "They will begin to carve me into pieces while I still breathe. Succession, marriage, regency. They will call it duty." Joseph's voice was quiet. "And you, my lord?" "I will call it survival," Baldwin said. He rose slowly, leaning on the altar rail more than he wished. His legs trembled, the weakness like water at the edge of a flood. He turned to Joseph. "Find out who writes to Saladin." Joseph's eyes widened. "My lord." "I do not ask for proof," Baldwin said. "I ask for truth. There is a difference." Joseph hesitated only a moment. Then he bowed. "Yes, my king." The next days unfolded like a tightening net. Joseph moved through the palace like a shadow with eyes. He listened in kitchens where servants traded rumors for bread. He stood near stables where knights spoke without thinking. He bribed a clerk with a silver coin and learned which seals had been pressed into wax recently. Baldwin watched from his throne, outwardly calm, inwardly burning. A new envoy arrived from the west, another nobleman seeking influence, bearing offers, promises, and the subtle implication that a sick king should accept help in exchange for surrendering control. Baldwin smiled politely and refused. His mother urged one match for Sibylla. Raymond suggested another. Balian warned that either choice could split the court. And all the while, beyond the borders, Saladin gathered strength like a storm building over the sea. On an evening when the sky was bruised purple and the wind carried desert dust, Joseph returned. He entered Baldwin's private chamber without announcing himself, already a breach of etiquette. His face was pale. Baldwin looked up from the documents he could barely sign. "Speak." Joseph's throat worked. "My lord, I found a letter." Baldwin's heart hammered. "From whom?" Joseph hesitated, then held out a folded parchment. The wax seal had been broken, but its imprint was still visible. Baldwin recognized it instantly. His breath caught, not in shock alone, but in the sheer bitter symmetry of it. The seal belonged to a man seated close to the throne, a man who had cheered at Montgisard, a man who spoke of unity, a man Baldwin had almost trusted. Baldwin lifted the letter with hands that could not fully feel it, yet felt its weight like lead. His eyes scanned the lines. The words were careful, no outright treason, no crude bargain. Only concern for stability, fear of the king's condition, a desire to avoid needless suffering, and the subtle offer of understanding to the Sultan's camp. Baldwin's vision blurred for a moment, not from tears but from rage. He looked at Joseph. "Who else knows?" "No one," Joseph whispered. "I took it before it could be delivered. But, my lord, if the writer realizes it is missing, they will act sooner," Baldwin finished. His hand trembled violently. The letter shook like a living thing. Baldwin stood. Pain blossomed behind his eyes. His legs threatened to fold. Pride forced them straight. He walked to the window and stared out at Jerusalem's rooftops, the domes and towers bathed in the last light. The city looked eternal from above, as if stone could deny time. Baldwin whispered, "So it begins." He turned back, face hardening into something colder than fear. "Summon Raymond," Baldwin said, "and my mother, quietly, tonight." Joseph's eyes flickered. "At this hour?" "At this hour," Baldwin said, "because by dawn the kingdom will already belong to someone else if we hesitate." He held up the letter, the seal catching candlelight. Then he spoke the words that would ignite the court like dry straw. "Before Saladin returns, we will have to fight our own palace." And as the bells of Jerusalem rang for Vespers, Baldwin IV, 16, victorious, dying, prepared to accuse a powerful lord of betrayal, knowing that one wrong move could shatter the fragile unity Montgisard had bought. Outside the walls, the desert wind rose. Inside, the king's hand clenched around the letter, not feeling it, but refusing to let go.